Alice Harris had built her life on certainty. At 35, she lived with her husband and 2 young children in a quiet Austin suburb. Their house, with its white fence and manicured garden, was a picture of domestic peace. Her husband, Adrian, was a well-respected corporate attorney, often away late at the office but always returning home with a warm smile. Their son, Elliot, was 8. Their daughter, Molly, 5. Alice, an elementary school teacher, devoted her time to them fully. Her life was predictable, structured, safe. She and Adrian had met in college. She was studying education, passionate about shaping young minds. He was a law student, sharp, ambitious, and already confident in the path ahead. They married young and wasted no time building a life together. Careers, a home in a good neighborhood, children. Alice took pride in what they had. They weren't perfect, but they were strong. She believed they had made it through the hard parts, the financial strain, the exhaustion of raising small kids, the inevitable friction of married life. They had weathered it all side by side, or so she thought. The changes in Adrian were subtle at first. He started staying late more often. Dinners became rare. His attention, once focused on their family, drifted elsewhere. He was quieter, distant. He stopped offering affection the way he used to. Alice told herself it was stress. His caseload was heavy. He needed space. So she gave it, creating warmth at home, hoping he'd return to it. But over time, the excuses wore thin. He began taking sudden weekend trips, claiming work obligations. He guarded his phone, kept it out of sight, turned it face down on the counter. These weren't things he used to do. A growing sense of unease settled into her chest, but she tried to push it down. Every time she asked, he gave the same response. "I'm just tired." "It's nothing. You're worrying too much." His calm reassurances became harder to believe. In her growing anxiety, Alice confided in her mother, Claire. They had always been close, more like best friends than mother and daughter. Claire had moved to Austin a few years back to be near them, and was a regular presence in their home. The kids adored her. Alice leaned on her, poured out her fears and frustrations. Claire. They listened, consoled, told her not to worry. And Alice, despite the gnawing doubt inside her, wanted to believe her mother was right. She clung to the life they'd built, their history, their family. She didn't want to believe it was unraveling. She went through the motions. Morning, routines, school drop-offs, grocery runs, bedtime stories. But under the surface, her world had begun to rot. The truth emerged on an ordinary morning. The house was quiet. Adrian had left early for work, and the children were spending the weekend with their grandmother. Alice, alone in the kitchen, was sipping coffee when Adrian's phone buzzed. He had left it behind, something he hadn't done in months. The screen lit up with a new message. A name appeared. Her mother. Just a few words were visible. "I can't wait to see you again." It hit her like ice water down her spine. Her first instinct was confusion, then denial. It didn't make sense. But her body moved on instinct, hands trembling as she opened the message thread. The rest confirmed what her mind refused to process. Texts, photos, private words exchanged between her husband and her mother. Sentiments meant to be kept secret, now laid bare in her hands. There was no ambiguity, no room for interpretation. The betrayal was total. She stood in the stillness of that kitchen for what felt like hours, the phone clutched in her hands, her breath shallow. Everything she thought was stable had been destroyed, and not by a stranger or a coworker, by her own mother, her husband, the two people she had trusted most. Alice didn't scream, she didn't cry. Instead, a numbness settled over her, cold and steady. Something inside her shifted. She could no longer tell what was real and what was a lie. The day passed in a haze. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to do. Confronting either of them meant acknowledging the nightmare was real. That night, the house remained quiet, but the silence felt different now, like a warning. She reached for the phone and unlocked it without hesitation. There were no secrets between them. At least there hadn't been. No passwords, no boundaries. But as the screen lit up and the familiar interface appeared, Alice stepped into a world she wasn't prepared to face. Opening the message thread, she froze. The name at the top, Claire, her mother. The contents, undeniable. They hadn't just been talking, they hadn't just been friendly. Every word exchanged between Claire and Adrian reeked of secrecy and desire. Messages stretched back months, layered with innuendo, clandestine meetings, stolen touches. Lines that no husband should ever write to his wife's mother. Lines no mother should ever dare to send. One message echoed in her mind more than the rest. "You're so careful, no one will ever know. It'll stay just between us." Alice sat down at the kitchen table, her whole body trembling. Her stomach churned, her vision blurred. It was as if her entire life, every carefully built piece of it, was crumbling in slow motion. Her breath caught in her throat as the magnitude of the betrayal wrapped itself around her like a vice. She couldn't break down. Not yet. She needed to see everything, to understand the full scope of what they had done. And so she kept scrolling, kept reading. Each message stabbed deeper. Every phrase etched another line of devastation into her heart. They had found excuses to meet when she was busy. They had lied about weekend plans, family visits, even moments with her children. They'd stood in her home, laughing over dinner, smiling in photos while they carried on something that desecrated every part of Alice's life. The hours passed, but she didn't move. Shock rooted her to the spot, and grief kept her from screaming. Her mother, her confidant, her friend, had betrayed her in the worst possible way. And Adrian, her husband, the father of her children, had done it with the one person she never thought to doubt. There was no coming back from this, but she didn't yet know how to confront it. She didn't know how to speak to either of them without shattering into 1,000 pieces. She needed more time, more proof, more control. So, she waited. In the days that followed, Alice wore a mask. She smiled at Adrian, made small talk, laughed when expected. She played the role of the oblivious wife perfectly. But beneath that surface, she was unraveling. Every night while he slept, she went through his phone again. New messages, new details, each one like a wound she couldn't stop reopening. She avoided her mother altogether, not out of strategy, but out of fear. She was afraid of what she might say, of what she might do if she looked her in the eye. But she could sense something had shifted. Claire had grown cautious, quieter, she knew, or she suspected. The tension clawed at Alice until it became unbearable. Something had to give. July 14th, 2023. The house was silent, but not peaceful. The weight in the air was suffocating. Adrian sat at the table, reading from his tablet. Alice stood in the kitchen, her hands moving automatically, preparing dinner that none of them would enjoy. The children were in the living room, laughing, unaware of the fracture beneath their feet. When the kids were finally in bed, the silence deepened. It felt like the final breath before a collapse. She turned to him. Her voice was calm, but cold. "We need to talk." He looked up slowly. She saw the flicker of fear in his eyes. He tried to hide it, but it was there. He forced a smile. "What do you want to talk about?" She stared at him. Every emotion, rage, grief, disgust, boiled. Beneath the surface, threatening to spill over. But she held it in. "I know everything, Adrian." The words landed like a blow. He went pale instantly. The tablet slipped from his hands and clattered against the table. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out at first. Alice didn't move. "I know about you and my mother." The room seemed to shrink around them. He blinked rapidly, panicking. "Alice, it's not what you think." But even he didn't believe his own words. And it was far too late for lies. Alice raised her hand, cutting him off before he could speak. "Don't," she said quietly. "I've seen everything, every message." Her voice cracked, trembling under the weight of what she knew. "You lied to me. You betrayed this family. I just want to know, how could you?" Adrian lowered his gaze, unable to form a single word. Nothing he could say would make this better. He knew that. His thoughts spiraled. Shame, fear, the crushing realization that everything might be unraveling for good. He could feel the fury radiating off her, and though she hadn't moved toward him, he sensed the unpredictability of the moment. He had no idea what she might do, what she was capable of now that the illusion had shattered. But she didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She didn't even stay. Without another word, Alice turned and walked toward the door, her shoulders stiff, her steps uneven. She was barely holding herself together, and she knew that if she didn't get out, she would lose control, say something she couldn't take back, or worse. The night air hit her like a wave, cold, still. She stepped into the darkness and let it swallow her. Outside, she tried to breathe. Her mind was chaos, fragments of trust, years of memories, all now contaminated. Every corner of her life felt tainted. She stood under the sky, listening to nothing and everything, trying to decide what to do next. Back inside, something was shifting. Adrian sat motionless, hands clenched. Panic pulsed through his veins. There was no coming back from this, not if she exposed everything. Not if she went to the children, or to the rest of the family, or to the world. He saw his life unraveling, his job, his image, everything he had carefully built. Humiliation, scorn, rage, and then something else crept in. A dangerous, desperate kind of clarity. If he didn't act, she would, and she could destroy him. He stood slowly, heart pounding. He wasn't thinking straight anymore. He just knew one thing. He had to regain control. Alice didn't hear the door open. She was staring up at the moon, her arms wrapped around herself, trying to stay upright. She didn't hear him come up behind her, and then his hand was around her throat. She gasped, but his other hand clamped over her mouth, silencing the scream before it could escape. Her hands shot up, clawing at his, trying to pry him off, but he was stronger, too strong. Her body jerked and twisted as she fought for air, every muscle straining. She kicked, struggled, but the night remained still. No one saw, no one heard. Her eyes locked onto his, wild, terrified, betrayed, until the light in them faded. When it was done, Adrian staggered back, panting. His hands were shaking violently, his mind scrambling to understand what had just happened. She was lying there, motionless, silent. Her face was turned to the sky, her expression frozen in that final moment of horror. He stared down at her, and the weight of it all finally crashed over him. This was real. He had done it. And there was no undoing it now. At dawn on July 15, 2023, the sun rose over a quiet Austin neighborhood. The stillness was broken by the distant whine of sirens. Police cars lined the street. A neighbor, unsettled by the stillness at the Harris house, had made the call. Detective Jessica Miller was the first to arrive. Experienced, composed, and quietly observant, she stepped out of her vehicle and approached the house. Adrian was waiting on the porch, his eyes bloodshot, his face pale. He looked exhausted, unshaven, like a man who hadn't slept in days. But there was something else, something she couldn't yet name. "What happened?" she asked. Adrian swallowed hard. "My wife. I found her in the backyard. She's dead." The words came flat, mechanical, as if he wasn't fully connected to them. His head lowered, avoiding her gaze. Miller felt a prickle at the back of her neck. Something was off, but she didn't push. Not yet. Inside, officers moved quickly. The backyard was sealed. The forensics team began their work. Alice's body lay on the grass, her limbs still, her eyes closed. There were clear marks around her neck. No cuts, no wounds, just the unmistakable signs of strangulation. Miller examined the area carefully. No overturned furniture, no torn clothing, no visible signs of a struggle. It was clean, too clean. It looked like she had simply walked out and never walked back in. Inside, Adrian sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the surface in front of him. He looked numb, but Miller had seen enough people lie to know that calm could be a mask. "You said you found her this morning?" He nodded. "I got up early, went outside, that's when I saw her. And last night, I went to bed after the kids were asleep. I didn't hear anything. I don't know what happened." He wasn't looking at her. His hands fidgeted, slightly. Miller took note. It wasn't enough for an arrest, not yet. But her instincts told her this wasn't what it seemed. Later, when they spoke to neighbors, the accounts were vague. Some recalled hearing voices late into the night, tense, hushed, but no screams, no obvious sounds of violence. Everyone said the same thing. Nothing had seemed out of the ordinary. But then came something unexpected. Alice had confided in a friend, a woman named Marie. And when Marie came in to speak with the detectives, her words shifted everything. Alice had discovered something that had shattered her world, and she had been preparing to confront it. Alice had confided in me, Marie said quietly, seated across from the detectives in her dimly lit living room. She told me she'd found out about Adrian, about the affair with me. Her voice broke on the last word. She was destroyed. I don't think she knew how to process it. We spoke just a couple of days ago. She said she felt like her whole life had been a lie. Detective Jessica Miller listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. That single revelation reframed the entire investigation. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was something deeper, more twisted. Family, secrets, and the kind of devastation that doesn't leave people unchanged. The detectives turned next to Alice's phone, combing through her messages and emails. The contents painted a clearer picture. Exchanges with her mother, raw and tense, filled with guilt, denial, and fear. Alice's mother had begged her not to destroy the fragile structure they'd built, the illusion of normalcy, the family. But Alice had been resolute. She couldn't stay silent. With this, Adrian Harris's motives no longer needed guesswork. Fear of exposure, fear of losing control, fear of everything crumbling around him. For Miller, the pieces were falling into place. She'd seen cases like this before, when someone backed into a corner lashes out, clinging desperately to what they believe they're about to lose. Evidence came in steadily. Trace elements on Adrian's clothes matched particles found on Alice's body. He couldn't explain the contact. His alibi began to split at the seams, his version of the night's events riddled with inconsistencies. Claire Harris, Alice's mother, was brought in for questioning. She wore grief like a mask, perfectly placed tears, a trembling voice, hands that wouldn't stop fidgeting. But behind her eyes, something else flickered. Not just sorrow, not just shock. Guilt, perhaps, fear, something she was still holding back. Under pressure, the cracks began to show. She stopped pretending. "I ended it," she whispered. "I swear I ended it before Alice found out. I didn't know he would—" Her voice broke off, and she covered her face with shaking hands. She didn't finish the sentence. Later, Adrian sat alone in the interrogation room. The overhead light cast harsh shadows across his face. He looked hollow. The confidence he once carried had completely disintegrated. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Detective Miller walked in, a file tucked under her arm. She sat across from him, calm, measured. She didn't speak right away, letting the silence stretch just long enough to unsettle him. "We know about the affair," she said at last. "We know Alice found out, and we know you were with her that night." Adrian didn't respond, his jaw tensed. His eyes avoided hers. "You were scared," she continued, voice steady but quiet. "Scared of losing your life, your family, everything you built. You felt cornered. That hit something." Adrian's shoulders slumped slightly. He looked up just for a second. Anger, guilt, fear, all tangled together in his face. "I didn't want it to end like this," he muttered. His voice was hoarse, barely more than a breath. "It got out of control." Miller leaned forward slightly. "Tell me what happened." "Adrian." There was a long pause, then slowly, like each word physically hurt to say, he began. "She found the messages. Between me and Claire, she lost it. I tried to explain to calm her down, but she said she'd tell everyone. She said she'd ruin me." His fists clenched, trembling against the table. "She pushed me. I don't even remember how it started. I just snapped. Everything was spinning, and then it was over. She was just there on the ground." Miller didn't interrupt. She watched him carefully, her silence coaxing more out of him. "I didn't know what to do," he continued, barely audible now. I went inside. I sat there. I waited until morning and told the police I found her. I don't know what I thought. With that, Adrian went quiet. He stared past her, eyes unfocused. His confession wasn't complete, but it was enough. Enough to support the evidence. Enough to break the last illusion. Outside the station, the story had already begun to spread. A man kills his wife after she discovers he's been sleeping with her own mother. It was too grotesque, too personal, too tragic not to make headlines. In their quiet community, it was all anyone could talk about. But even beyond the town's borders, the story ignited something. People drawn to the morbid collapse of a seemingly perfect family. Detective Miller closed her notebook slowly. The case wasn't over yet, but the truth had finally begun to surface, and there was no burying it now. The trial moved quickly, though nothing about it felt rushed. The prosecution laid everything bare. Adrian's confession, the damning messages, exchanged with Claire Harris, and the undeniable forensic evidence that placed him at the scene when Alice died. Piece by piece, they built the image of a man unraveling, driven by fear and desperation, and ultimately violence. The defense leaned heavily on Adrian's mental state, painting a picture of emotional collapse. They argued that he hadn't planned, that he'd acted under the crushing weight of betrayal, panic, and confusion, that he was not a cold-blooded killer, but a broken man in a moment of psychological collapse. But the court wasn't swayed. The facts spoke louder than excuses. The calculated lies, the concealment of the truth, the brutal end Alice had suffered, it all told a story that couldn't be softened. After deliberation, the court sentenced Adrian Harris to 55 years in prison. No possibility of parole. When the verdict was read, the room fell into a silence so dense it seemed to press against the walls. No one moved. No one spoke. It wasn't relief. It wasn't closure. It was the weight of knowing that something irreparable had happened. Justice had come for Alice Harris, but it was cold comfort. The cost had already been paid in full. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more disturbing true crime stories. Leave your thoughts and theories in the comments below.